As we continue to calculate the costs of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, one important point to focus is the increasing costs on health expenditure. Now, this is at individual levels, at the level of families, and of course, at the level of state and the entire economy as well. So, the State Bank of India's regular report, the EcoRap report, has predicted that health expenditure can go up to 11% of private final consumption expenditure due to COVID-19, and this could be a conservative estimate. To speak about the impact of this increased health expenditure on consumption overall by people, the overall impact on the economy, and the fears of inflation that are creeping up, I'm joined now by Dr. S.K Ghosh, Chief Group Economist at State Bank of India. Dr. Ghosh, thank you for speaking with us here on the India Development Debate. Pleasure to have you on as always. Can you first set the premise for us on how the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is impacting expenditure on healthcare?
Yeah, thank you, Tamanna. Nice to be on the show. I think the current pandemic, the second wave, which actually has been extremely devastating, and the impact, initially it was felt that the impact would be minimal. But as days are progressing, I think the impact would be actually very much significant in terms of an economic as also in terms of other impacts. The most important point to note over here is that, and that could actually have macroeconomic policy implication, is that the significant increase in the health expenditure. Health, as you know, is a discretionary component in the overall consumption basket. But this time, the increase in this expenditure is because of forced reasons. And we actually estimated that whatever, because of the price increase, because of the hospitalization expenses, and because of the possible salary loss, as of today, I think, and the data is available till FY20, the total private final consumption expenditure was around 123 lakh crores, of which 6 lakh crores was health expenditure. And this year, as per the CSO projections, which were released in January 2021, this total private final consumption expenditure could actually decline by close to around 8% and could land at 115 lakh crores. But the important point to note is that the health expenditure overall, which was at 6 lakh crores, could at least rise to close to 6.7 lakh crores, which is basically an incremental increase of 70,000 crores. Please note that these assumptions are based on most conservative estimates and on minimum amount of hospitalization expenses. There are other ancillary expenses which a person has to take if he has fallen in. But as of now, this could be the minimal increase in health expenditure, 70,000 crore in absolute terms in the overall private final consumption expenditure basket.
So what does an additional expenditure of 70,000 crores do to private consumption patterns? I want to ask you this question in two parts, Dr. Ghosh. One is this also reflecting what is happening in rural India right now, where not just resources would be lesser, but access to healthcare would be also much lesser? So are these figures truly reflective of the pandemic which is now raging through rural parts of India? And secondly, what does this increased expenditure on healthcare do to discretionary consumer spending overall?
Yes, I think, Tamanna, that's a great question. The first part I want to say is that I think that is having a significant impact in the rural areas. I think as per our last estimates, we found out that the total amount of new cases in the rural areas around 50.4%. And in some states like Andhra Pradesh, the rural cases in the new cases category was as much as 86%. So this time the rural hinterland has been badly savaged because of the pandemic. So what it's doing is that it is actually pushing up the health expenditure in the rural areas to a significant extent. In fact, one data point which I'd like to mention and which may have missed everyone's eye when the inflation number was released, the CPI number was released last week, is the core inflation number in the rural areas. The rural area core inflation number is now at 6.4%, which is a record high. And that is actually contributed to a significant expense in the health expenditure, because if you look into all components, the surgeon expenses, the medical expenses, the hospitalization expenses, the nurse expenses, this data which is given out by the CSO, all of them are showing a significant increase. This was in the month of April, and possibly this number could actually go up even further in the month of May, because May has been even bad in terms of the impact. The second point to note over here is that I'll bring in an additional component over here, which actually, if we have time, we can take that, is that health is, of course, a discretionary component. So as I said, if the total health expenditure at least increases by 70,000 crore in the private PFCE basket, some data suggests that the total recreation expenses of an individual is around 80,000 crore. So the first thing could be that there will be a significant cutback on those other expenses, which could actually slow down growth significantly. But the other important point over here is that the discretionary consumption is also being hit because of a continued increase in oil prices, which is actually also pushing down the expenses on discretionary items. So on the one hand, people have to spend on discretionary products like health, but on the other hand, because of the increase in the oil prices, a large part of their consumption expenditure is also getting squeezed. And that is also having an impact on the other discretionary components in the overall expenditure budget. So actually, the consumers are caught in a double whammy at this point of time.
Let me also add one more aspect to that, sir. So we are talking about inflation going up, fuel prices going up, health expenses going up, and the economy possibly not recovering at the pace that was expected. It is now widely accepted that the second wave is going to hit GDP projections for this year. I think you have also projected that GDP will grow at a slower rate than was previously expected, and you're already on a low base because of the lockdown last year. So what does this combination of slower than expected growth and higher than expected inflation do to individual incomes and overall recovery?
Yes, I think here again, I would like to mention one point is that we actually did another exercise to find out whether the current inflation number which the NSO is giving out, how correctly they are portraying the ground increase. Because please note that these CSO inflation numbers are actually based on fixed weights. But in a situation like the pandemic, as I've said, the weights are not fixed because people are actually cutting back on discretionary spending. So if you actually do an exercise, as most developed countries estimate that inflation by changing the weights on a regular basis, we get an inflation number which is significantly higher than 4.19%, which has been 2.9%, which has been given by the CSO in the month of April. So this is point number one. The second point is that given the large base last year, if we just assuming that there is no growth this year, no incremental growth this year, even then we could have growth of 8.7%. So any growth below 8.7% will mean that the economy is actually contracting again this year and there is no incremental growth. As of now, we have cut our forecast from 11% to 10.4%, but we are now clear that the growth rate will be in single digits, because after we had cut the growth rates, there are a lot of other states which have now imposed a lockdown, including West Bengal and other states. So if that is the case, I think the growth rate will be lower than 10%. We'll obviously have a higher inflation. There is now a real prospects of Fed possibly hiking the rates. If that happens, then there could be pressure on the exchange rate. Hopefully, the central bank has done quite a magnificent job in terms of controlling the value of the rupee. But I think the policy challenges this year are much on the plate. One is a liquidity management, one is the higher cost of borrowing, one is the prospect of a higher inflation, another is the prospect of a growth, not surprising on the downside as of now. So I think it's going to be a challenging year. So let's see how we are able to cope with all these multiple challenges.
Let's take a little forward-looking view, say from the next 6 to 12 months. Now, we're in a situation where, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're beginning to see cases coming down. So we may be off the highs of the second wave. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the third wave. But we still need at least another 3 to 5 months to kick off a proper mass vaccination program. How do you see these two factors colliding to any hope of economic recovery that we can see perhaps towards the end of calendar year 2021?
See, I think vaccination as of now is going to be the most crucial indicator of whether how well we are able to rejuvenate our economy. If you look into the UK model, they closed down, vaccinated each of them, and now see all the US and the UK projections of growth rate is actually quite decent and robust. But in our case, if I look into the numbers as of now, I think May, June, and even June, the opted out could be a month where the vaccine drive will not be that good. So I think that is one of the problems at this point of time. And if we go by the government of India data that at least 215 crore vaccines will be available from August to December, that means that, and there are data in the public domain which shows that the herd immunity comes between 60 to 70%. So if we have 200 crore vaccination, and if we are able to vaccinate, say, at least around 45 to 50 lakh people per day, then the total number of people who could be vaccinated by the end of September or even October could be around 65% of the total population and 15% of the people getting second dose. So there actually the herd immunity could kick in, but these are all contingent on the assumptions that how quickly, how vigorously you are able to vaccinate all our people. Because otherwise, I think this fear factor of the third wave and the second wave, it has hit us so badly and unexpectedly that even though we may have passed the peak right now, people will be apprehensive of coming out. So everything now depends on how quickly we can scale up the vaccination program. I think if we go by this number of 200 crore plus, I think that will be enough to vaccinate a large part of the adult population by the end of this year. So we can definitely hope for a better third quarter and possibly a robust fourth quarter if these assumptions hold true.
All right, that all depends on the pace of vaccination. So we can only hope that process gets rolled out quickly. We had the soft launch of the Sputnik last week, and we'll have to wait and see if there is enough volume coming in to fill in those gaps. But thank you, as always, Dr. Soumyakanti Ghosh, for speaking with us today.